have you ever bought an article of clothing deemed one size fits all? I really believe we all have a hard time believing that this is one size fits all. I mean, it fits, but it's like I'm wearing a dress, and then if you put it on a 6-foot tall man, maybe, but a 5-foot tall woman, not so much. So I would say that one size fits all is not a true or good way to do anything. There is a problem, I find, with our public schools. They also employ a one-size-fits-all approach to education. I have a deep issue with that because, just like us, kids are different. They're not all going to fit into the one-size-fits-all mold that public schools currently employ. Everyone here benefits or contributes to public schools. Either you have kids in school or we pay for them through our taxes. So public schools are important to everybody. So I have a 3-year-old, and she's going to start kindergarten in 2 years. And when looking into schools, public schools especially, I wonder if the bureaucracy and the curriculum and just the problems with public school are going to crush the level of learning that she has. So I started looking into different ways or different options for school, and there are other options. You have public school or you have private school. That's it. There's no choice. There's no option. That's what there is. So I did find, however, that 2/3 of the states in the country have other options than just public schools. They have things called charter schools. Nebraska has no charter schools. So I started looking more into it, and I found that charter schools have some really great benefits. They increase the flexibility for teachers to teach. They don't have to stick to regular curriculums. They have more accountability when it comes to performance standards for students. They have high rates of satisfaction. Parents and teachers and students alike like them more. Like I said, there's no charter schools in Nebraska. So I think that we should find some funding, or we should increase some funding for schools in Nebraska, and I'm going to kind of break down the reasons why. The first reason I think we should have increased funding or some funding for charter schools is because of the increased flexibility and accountability. So here's the thing, is a charter school is a public school. It's open to everybody, it's free tuition, anyone can go. As such, the public school, the U.S. Department of Education holds a charter school to the same standards as a public school. So basically what you have here is it's a different kind of school that still is within the public school system. What makes them different, though, is charter schools can set their own goals to measure how students perform. They don't use the dreaded standardized tests that everybody hears about. They don't have to use that. There's an agreement between school boards and charter schools. The agreement basically says that we will give the charter school increased autonomy and increased flexibility in exchange for more accountability. Basically, if you're going to have a charter school, the school boards are on it. They are going to make sure that the students perform at or even better than traditional public school students. The increased autonomy and flexibility makes the charter school exempt from the normal regulations that public schools traditionally have to follow. That means they set their own curriculums. They choose how they want to teach what they teach. So they can change a curriculum, they can speed things up, they can slow things down, based on the needs of the students. Basically, a charter school focuses on the students and tailors it to fit them. This allows them to focus on the students more. Say you have high-risk students, or you have like students who don't have English as a native language, or you have special needs students, or highly gifted students. Those students are able to learn directly from the teacher because they are not stuck following this one-size-fits-all approach that most public schools have to follow. The teachers have the freedom to teach. The end result ends up being the same. They end up learning just as much as public schools, but the methods are quite different. They do have to report to the school boards, because like I said, they are public schools, but they have to prove their performance, and the school board oversees everything. They oversee all the performance, the teachers' salaries, the tax money, how's it being used. And since they are special schools, the board will shut them down. They can shut them down if they do not perform well. The National Center for Education Statistics has 75% of 8th grade students at basic levels of reading and math, and that's all schools across the board. So the job is getting done, but I think we all agree that public schools don't have the best way of going about it. So that leads me to the next reason we should fund charter schools is the amount of satisfaction that teachers and students and parents have. It's higher. The increased accountability agreement with the school board, it leads to this environment where everybody involved has a more vested interest in keeping the school running and having the students perform well. Since the parents choose to put their child in the school, they in general play a bigger role and more hands-on approach for their children's education. They volunteer more, they fundraise, they help lobby, they're teaching sometimes, helping with events. they're more hands-on than traditional public schools. This hands-on approach puts them in more direct contact with their children's teacher. This creates a paradigm where the students have mom and dad and teacher, and everybody is vested in making sure they learn. So that's where the curriculum, they can tailor it to meet each student's individual needs. The curriculum is also kind of cool. Here is an example. I'll pass this around after I'm done, but this is Child Discovery Center in Grand Rapids. This is a charter school. It is a full-on public school it's a charter school. So it's a little different. I'll kind of let you check it out afterwards. It just goes over kind of what their curriculum was and why they do what they do. The curriculum in most charter schools, they have a belief that the so-called like extracurricular things like art, music, PE, nature, home ec, those things enhance the learning of traditional math, reading, arithmetic, that kind of thing. Wait, math, reading, yeah. They enhance those traditional subjects, so they are a huge part of the curriculum at the charter schools. So the National Education Association, the NEA, they wrote an article, they did a survey, and they wanted to know what registered voters, what their top problems in public schools were. The top 3 were distinct lacks of parental involvement, cuts to PE, music, art, and extracurricular classes, and too much focus on those standardized testing. The testing model currently used by public schools in this day, it seemed like a good idea at the time, but what's happening is we're emphasizing the scores and not the learning. The tests are becoming the end instead of the means to an end. The end should be our children's education, not their scores on these tests. In that same survey, 70% of the people interviewed had a very favorable view of teachers. So the problem doesn't seem to be with teachers, it has to do with the regulations, the bureaucracy, just the way that public schools work in general. That same article by the NEA is titled, Voters Rank Top Problems Facing Education, Lack of School Choice Isn't One of Them. The way they word it kind of sounds like parents don't need to have a choice in schools, and nor should they, like why? But what's funny about that is those top 3 problems I mentioned are completely remedied by the nature of a charter school. The parents are way more involved because they chose to put their children there. They don't use standardized tests. They test, yes, but that's not how they test it. They don't have to do it that way. And because they believe that extracurricular subjects enhance learning, they're chock full of them. There's tons of PE, art classes, there's woodworking classes I saw, there's violin, you can learn German, you can go on nature hikes, there's home ec, there's sewing, there's tons and tons of different classes offered to children. So we've kind of broken down why charter schools are better. They're more flexible, they have more accountability, people love them more. There's another reason though that we should increase funding for charter schools, because Nebraska has no charter schools. There aren't any here. We've tried though. There's been 2 bills total introduced to the legislature. Both were killed before they got out of the committee. The latest one was last year in 2015, and it was a bill to open 5 public but independently funded schools in Omaha. The legislators shot it down. They gave various reasons. Most of them had to do with the accountability or transparency of the taxpayer dollars, things like that. But they did cite evidence that charter schools do indeed improve education, they encourage competition, and they give students and parents choices. The Omaha World Herald wrote an article titled, Lawmakers Kill Bill to Allow Charter Schools. I want to quote Kate Sullivan. She is the Education Committee Chairwoman. She says, we do not want to send the message that the committee is closing the door on options, end quote. The problem is with the bills. They write the bills, there's some problem with them, they shoot them down. But I'm taking this to mean that charter schools are something that Nebraskans need, and I think of a possibility of getting it passed. Educate Nebraska, it's a lobby group that was formed at the beginning of this year. They've created a model for Nebraska to use. Their model is based off one that is currently used in charter schools in California, and it works with great success. The main thing that we know from this is that the money to pay for the school follows the student. So students move to this school and funding broken down per student goes with them. So the main thing is we don't have to pay more taxes. Our tax money, the money is already there to pay for these schools. Charter schools also use private funds and private donors. That actually makes a lot of sense, because when you're educating children, you're educating the future. You've got the future doctors, future lawyers, future teachers, future leaders. So it makes sense that people would like to invest and make sure children are being taught properly. So Ballotpedia is a really big just database of political things. They broke down the way the money works in each state the best, so I'm using them as my reference here. So 58% of local taxes pay for schools in Nebraska. That's us. You and I pay for all schools in Nebraska through our taxes. 32% comes from Nebraska, and 10% comes from federal. So my question is, if we pay for the bulk of the education of our children, why do we have no say where they go, how they're taught, what they're taught, and why we have one option, that's it? So we've seen some reasons now. I've broken down why we should fund charter schools. So they have greater flexibility for teachers, there's more accountability for everybody to learn, and there's greater satisfaction for all involved. And there's not Nebraska. We need to get these in Nebraska. We should talk to our legislators. I have this handy dandy chart right here, beautifully done in rainbow, thanks to my toddler. These are our district representatives from Lincoln, all of them. These are our legislators. And look, there's their emails. Email's easy. You don't have to call them. You can just type a little note. Let them know, hey, I like the idea of charter schools. I'd like to learn more. Do you have opinions? Do you support these? Ask some questions. As parents and contributors to schools, I think it's important. I think it's something we should all do. So there you go. That's the end. Thank you.